Thanks for staying with us. This is Newsline, and we're talking about this new sentiment in Hong Kong, hate the rich or anti-business. I've got James Song from the City University and Michael DeGolyer from Baptist University. Now, Michael DeGolyer, just before the break, we were talking, and Dr. Song was talking about unfairness, and so were you, in Hong Kong society. There's no competition. Okay, so we all know that people feel society has become very unfair. Is this going to go anywhere, or are people just going to sit back and take it, or do you think this anti-business, anti-tycoon, anti-rich sentiment is going to result in social unrest?
Well, I think we were clearly heading that way, but we bought ourselves some time. With the constitutional reform, people have hopes that will lead to fairer policy making. They feel that the compromise that the government reached, in which effectively they broke that 50-50 balance between the tiny functional constituencies in which only about 200,000 people voted
have the right
for
to
half
vote
of the legislative council.
Right.
Whereas 3.5 million people only got the other half. And that just, again, is this sense of unfairness. Almost by definition, you can look at it with the voting
in our political structure, right?
That's right. And in 2012, of course, now we'll have at least 6 of those seats on the other side, breaking that half-half barrier, will be voted on by everybody who doesn't have a vote now. So at least for the first time, everybody will have effectively 2 votes, one for geographic constituencies and one for functional
constituencies. 6 of those functional constituency seats.
So that begins to redress that balance. But what it also does, we're picking up clear indicators that raises people's hopes that things will get fairer.
You're picking up indicators from what, your opinion polls?
From our surveys, yeah. And that's where you have both danger and opportunity,
right.
Which could lead to crisis by definition. Because what we have is, as people raise hopes that things will get fairer, if they
they'll
don't,
be wanting more.
If that's exactly right. If they don't, at some point, the resentment comes back even stronger than we've already seen. And we saw, I think, pretty clearly over the last 6 months to a year, that particularly for folks in their 20s, that they're getting pretty desperate. And I think that it's really incumbent on the government to do something about this, and to take this opportunity that they've gotten now over the next couple of years.
Well,
to do something.
James Song, do what? First of all, are you afraid that we're going to see riots in the streets?
Not in this moment, but I don't want to speculate next year what's happening. It depends on how this year's policies address to
Donald Tsang's annual policy speech on October
how
13th.
to deal with the issue of public housing, and whether or not the government are willing to launch a new scheme on home ownership. This is what the people are looking for, especially the majority of the people really want to government to moving on that direction. If there's no move, then I think that would disappoint the people.
Are you saying that if the government somehow finds a formula to make property prices more affordable, then this anti-business, anti-rich sentiment will go away?
That's one step.
That's just one step.
That's part of the problem. Okay.
What are the? I mean, okay. So Donald Tsang is going to have to do something, and there's a lot of speculation about what he's going to do. The one thing the government doesn't really want to do is to build home ownership flats again. They've been saying that they're reluctant to do that.
And the people also would like to see the government have the administrative power, okay, to putting pressure, not just putting pressure on the real estate community, but also putting some punishment for those people who violate the law and the rules and regulation. So not just putting things in the paper, something saying in the mouth, but really act out something to send a strong signal to those people.
But you know, that is, I'm going to ask both of you this, that is something that I don't know whether the government feels it has the power to do that? I don't know.
Well, there's a whole list of things that
how
you could
do you
do.
come down on the developers or the tycoons?
With the developers, it would be quite easy. For basically, what you do is if they have a piece of property and they haven't used it in X amount of time,
you force them to use it.
You just start taxing them on it just sitting there as long as it's not being used.
The point is not that you can or cannot do it. The point is whether you have the political will to do it.
Yes,
right.
the will to do it. And right at the moment, there's a lot of I think, support for the government to do something. I mean, they realize that we have gotten into an intolerable situation. Our surveys are even picking up the beginning of a drop in belief that direct elections will actually make a difference. And so we're really entering a kind of a danger zone where people are beginning to give up on the governance system itself, the democratic system, the participation in elections, whether the government can actually deliver against these tiny interests that seem to be entrenched with great power. So if the government doesn't do something, then I do think in future we're going to be facing some real problems, particularly since hopes have been raised. If they're dashed even further, then we will have problems. And there are many things the government could do. Things that aren't that difficult to do, things that have been suggested that need to be done.
And it should be done, but the point is, like, I go back to the meeting, James Song, between Hu Jintao and Li Ka-shing, and you saw that meeting, we all saw that. Having seen that meeting, does that scare the government even more in saying, how can I crack down on the major developers or the tycoons in Hong Kong when they've got such access?
So that's why Lee now established a Lee Ka-shing Foundation, try to please the people, okay, try to embrace some creative idea, and then there will be some funding from the foundation, that kind of thing. But I don't think that could please the people too much. People were looking for a more fair treatment to all walks of the life, not just.
James Song, you're saying that the government should go in there and change the entire structure that Hong Kong has had all these years. You're saying that the government should, like Michael DeGolyer says, tax land that's been sitting there and not being touched by the developers.
That's not changing the structure. That's a minor shift.
I know, but
if you really want radical stuff, there are suggestions been made about that too.
But I know, Michael. But the point I'm trying to make here is you're asking the government to do things completely differently, breaking away from its motto that it's a small government, big market. You're asking the government to actually go in there and interfere with all these things.
If the government bold enough to introduce cumulative taxation, if you make profits more than 100 million, so you will have to pay more tax. That kind of
that's not the style that.
Yeah. Let's send a very strong signal to the people that the government, yes, we know what's the problem. We are going to restructuring something. We have the responsibility to have a fair allocation of social wealth. That kind of symbol is important.
Let me point something out to both of you. You're talking about allocation of wealth, right? Okay. Just a few days ago, the General Chamber of Commerce came out and said that taxes should be lowered. And this is the voice of business in Hong Kong, from 16.5% down to 15%. And you're saying that the taxes should go higher up the more money you make?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is basically, if we may have a small government, but we have a government that owns every square inch of land in Hong Kong. And
so you're not agreeing with Jameson that taxes should go up?
No.
Should taxes come down?
What I'm saying is that government should basically exercise the power that it has. It has power over land, and it should exercise that power. Effectively, if it puts land up for auction, and the point of putting land up for auction is to use it, and it's not being used, then the government, it seems to me, has a case to basically...
And they're doing that in China,
tax.
They're doing that in China.
A lot of people are doing
right,
and it's an obvious thing to do. And it's so obvious that it should be an easy thing to do.
So why isn't the government doing it?
That's a good question.
Do you know why the government's not doing that?
I think there are all kinds of deep-rooted contradictions. For years, the government simply not find a way to deal with that. So it accumulates until today. So all kinds of explosion. So you can see. So I don't think Donald Trump could have the will, yeah, to deal with this kind of problem.
One simple alternative that would also transform this would be to take all of that factory land. We have millions of square meters of building space tied up in factories that are no longer there. And the government will wink, wink, nudge, nudge, kind of accept you changing the use of that. But there's no real legal structured way
to do it,
to shift it over. If they came out with that and just let the big developers alone, let them sit on their land bank, but basically flood the market with
those factory
all
buildings.
These empty factory buildings that can be revitalized and rebuilt, and just like they do in so many cities with loft development,
right.
People that would have terrific impact, and you wouldn't have to build a single home ownership
for a
scheme
long
at
time.
All.
Well, you know, I've got just 2 minutes. I'm going to ask both of you. We've talked about this anti-business sentiment, anti-rich sentiment. I'm just going to give one of you a minute each to tell me in closing. You tell me this, James Song. October 13th is the day the governor, the chief executive, gives his annual policy speech. How can he diffuse this sentiment that is now growing, this disillusionment in Hong Kong? What can he do? What would you do?
Yeah, I would say that the government definitely should launch a new scheme on home ownership thing for the younger generation, giving them some hope. And then to deal with the poverty problem in Hong Kong, I think the government have to rejuvenate the committee on helping the poor.
Bring back this poverty commission.
The government have to have a better interdepartmental cooperation to deal with this serious problem.
Okay.
And also for the aged people, the government still have
the elderly, right?
Yeah, the elderly.
Okay. I've got 30 seconds, Michael DeGolyer. What would you do?
Well, I've mentioned several things, but certainly getting a competition policy passed that had teeth, and basically making sure that people knew it had teeth and
I had Greg So here some time back, and he said it will have teeth.
Yeah, I hope so. And the second one I think that would have the biggest impact that I mentioned before was basically legalizing redevelopment of these factory space. And there's a lot of other stuff to do with the educational and the educational system. I have a whole long string of these things.
But I've got to end it right here. Thanks for watching. See you next week. Good evening. Thanks.